Solar and battery storage unlocks new tariffs. Why do tariffs matter? Am I on the wrong tariff? Which tariff suits Powerwall and SigEnergy the best? This is going to be a big one. I hope I do it some justice. Let's go. Standard users have a standard rate. So this is a weighted average price that takes in consideration off-peak, on-peak, different prices at different times during the day and gives you one fixed price that you pay permanently. How it actually works for the energy suppliers is, overnight we generate lots of wind. In the middle of the day we generate some solar. We have quite a broad generation of nuclear energy, but that can only supply so much so quickly. And in those lulls when it's particularly cold, there's no wind, there's no sunshine, we burn lots and lots of gas. We also burn biomass wood pellets. And what most people don't realise, we import huge amounts of electricity from over in Europe in order to be able to meet our network demands. Now, what does this mean for you? Well, traditionally, you're on a standard user. There's not much you can do about it. You just need to buy the energy when you use it. However, when you adopt a technology, an electric vehicle, solar and battery storage, heat pump, you have what's called time of use tariffs. This is where we have off-peak windows, where it's really cheap on the grid, those renewable energies kick in, wind turbines are whirring around, and as a result, the energy supplier will sell you electricity for much cheaper. You also have peak times. So this is where, particularly between 4 and 7 PM on some tariffs, it's actually far more expensive to be able to buy energy. That's because your energy provider is paying more from the grid. However, when you have leverage a technology, say battery storage, what you're able to do is actually buy it when you don't need it. So often it can be overnight that it's cheap, you're in bed, but your technology can be leveraging the prices that are on the national grid. Buy it and scoop it up, think of it like a big barrel. It can store that energy, then when you turn the lights or turn the oven on later on in the day, that energy can be scooped up from your storage device and delivered into your home. Or it could be the case with an EV, for example, where your electric vehicle charges overnight and you drive it during the day. It doesn't matter when you charge it from your point of view, as long as it's ready for use for work in the morning. The next thing I want to come on to is exporting tariffs, also known as smart export guarantee. So this is where if you have a renewable energy source, wind turbine, solar, or you have energy stored from an off-peak rate, you can essentially send that energy out to the national grid and the national grid will pay you for it. Now, different tariffs that I'm going to come on to later pay different prices. So you can have some tariffs that pay very little and some tariffs that actually pay you a premium to deliver this power to the grid when it needs it most. This is essentially a big game of buying and selling, but you've got the technology to play the game. But in order to know which tariff you need to go on, you first of all need to understand which scenario you're in. We're going to keep it simple and then we're going to add to it as we go along. And then a little bit later on in the video, I'm going to actually describe which tariff works best in which scenario. I know this sounds a little bit complicated, so I'll try and unpack it in the best way I know how. So let's start with electric vehicles. We have intelligent tariffs. We have non-intelligent tariffs, and then we actually have tariffs that are incentivized by suppliers when you buy or lease cars from them. Let's start by explaining what an intelligent and non-intelligent tariff means. So a non-intelligent tariff is essentially where neither your car nor charger can connect to your energy supplier. Well, clearly these energy suppliers still want your business, but what they do is they tick the price up slightly and they often give you less time to charge. So a non-intelligent tariff is just where you essentially have a start time and a finish time. This is where effectively, say from midnight till 5 AM, your car can charge and all of the energy that's brought into the house during that time window is at a lower price rate. However, if you pick an intelligent charger or intelligent car, sometimes either or, depending on the tariff as well, then what can happen is your car or charger can connect to your energy supplier, which means they will give you preferential rates. If you've got a smart connected device, your energy supplier can say, hey, it's really cheap at 1:30 in the morning. We think it's best to supply your device then. And you actually get incentivized behind this. So I get my energy cheaper because my car effectively comes through Octopus. Now, this video isn't sponsored by Octopus. I'm genuinely going to go through all of the different suppliers and tariffs and how they all work in a second, so please don't think I'm biased towards one particular supplier just because my car comes through them. Now that we've understood that we've got non-intelligent, intelligent, and sometimes incentivized tariffs with EV, the next thing you need to know is on some tariffs, you can charge your battery storage at the same time you charge your car. So if you've got an off-peak rate, which can often be a 75% reduction in the main price you're paying, so your day rate, you can effectively leverage that, fill your battery up off-peak when you're sleeping, fill your car up overnight, and then use the power drawn out of your battery into your home. Or if you don't have an electric vehicle, there are also time of use tariffs for battery storage. Now, I hope you're still with me so far. Some of these battery storage are again non-intelligent and intelligent. So this is where your battery can look at the cheapest prices on the grid, or there are simple windows where your battery can charge for cheap during those time slots, bring in cheap electricity into battery, and then deliver that energy out to your home during the peak windows. Now we're going to go a step further and we're going to add solar panels into the mix. So we've now established my car's charging off peak, my battery's charging off peak, but when I've got solar generation, do I need to fill my battery up all the time? Well, the answer to that is, well, no, I don't. Because during the summer months, you're effectively going, well, I don't want to buy any energy at all. I would just want to leverage the free energy that's being generated on my roof and use that in my home, divert that out to my car. So this is when using an intelligent battery, like a SigEnergy SigenStor, or like the Powerwall 3, where they can look at the prices that you're paying, they can look at the weather forecast outside, they can look at your usage in your home, and what they can do is take a blend of all this information and go, well, actually, it's dead sunny outside. We don't need to buy any of that off-peak energy. Car goes on charge potentially overnight, but your house load, actually, the battery holds off. Doesn't charge, waits for the solar generation first thing in the morning and uses that energy to supply your home intelligently. In the winter, it's cold, it's miserable, we don't have solar generation, your battery technology is able to pick up on this, is able to charge off-peak and use off-peak energy then to supply your home throughout the course of the day. So this is where these intelligent tariffs start to kick in. Now we add another layer to that when we add solar panels in, which is the export. The export can be fixed, so this is where your energy supply pays you a fixed fee for the export regardless of the time of day. Or again, it can be intelligent. So this is when your battery storage goes, actually, between 4 and 7, tea time, when we've got lots of gas being burned, I've got a redundant amount of energy here that we don't need in this house. We can get that energy to export out the grid and you can get a premium for it. Your energy supply is laughing because they can effectively take that energy price and instead of paying a premium rate off the grid, they can buy it off you for a cut price and you eventually get cut both in on a piece of the action. So with export rates for solar, we can either get a fixed rate or we can get a variable rate, intelligent. A side note, if you also have solar and battery storage without EV, there are rates that are essentially out there that you're able to work and operate alongside that are specific for solar and battery storage. So, we're keeping up with me now. We're going to add on a heat pump into the equation. So when it comes to heat pump, again, there are specific heat pump tariffs. So this is where we need to consider our actual energy consumption. So if you've got an electric vehicle at this point in time and you drive a lot of miles, then you're going to be charging up more. We need to weigh up which uses more power. Sometimes it's preferential to use an EV tariff, charge battery storage up overnight and use the battery storage to supply the heat pump throughout the course of the day. But other times there are very specific heat pump tariffs where you're able to charge often 2 or 3 times a day in off-peak windows where we can buy in once, use battery storage to meet the demand during peak periods, and then buy again, rinse and repeat 3 times a day. And what that does is lowers your overall energy price for your heat pumps. You're buying cut price electric and using that electric to supply to your heat pump, thus not only lowering your electricity bills, but lowering your heating cost as well. And it's about how we get this to map in a symbiotic relationship. So alongside this, there are a couple of other unique scenarios, like those people out there that have a feed-in tariff system that works slightly differently again, and we want to make sure that we're keeping those feed-in tariff payments. But I think that's all for now in terms of complexity, and I think that will cover the majority of people. If you've got specific inquiries, I'm more than happy for you to drop those in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them. But now let's actually have a look at the energy suppliers themselves, the scenarios we'd find themselves in, and which one I think would be potentially the cheapest tariff. There's quite a bit to it, so I've got an iPad with a bit of information from a reference point of view. I don't want to quote anything wrong. I think the one thing I would say is the fact that these energy prices also change. You also get different prices by region. So just take these exact prices with a pinch of salt. I've based them upon our postcode here in Wilmslow, which is where we're based as a business. Obviously, depending on your postcode will depend on the prices that are available for on your market. So do check them. I feel like that's enough of a disclaimer there. And if anybody finds a tariff that's actually cheaper than any of these that I've come up against, or they've got a different way of doing it, I would love to hear how. I'm always in a stage of trying to learn from people. Please don't feel like you're criticising us in any way. Instead, bob it in the comments below, because I think people will have a read of these and then can also read some real life scenarios. Because if you're going, well, actually, I've done it better than that, and that's how I've done it, then I think other people would really, really love to hear that. So let's go through a heat pump in this scenario, and that's coupled alongside battery storage. So we have 4 major suppliers with this, a few little sub-suppliers, but they kind of do them as time of use tariffs. So we have Octopus, Scottish Power, EDF and E.ON that all offer a very specific heat pump tariff, and they all do it slightly differently. So there are 2 tariffs out of here that I think are probably going to be better depending on the scenario you're based in. Some are offering better prices than others. So the 2 first of all that I have discounted from this is the EDF heat pump tracker and the E.ON next pump tariffs. The reason why I didn't like the EDF tariff was only the fact that you only had 2 short bursts of windows. Actually, the Octopus tariff offered you another 2 hours, and the actual price was only 10 pence off the main unit rate. So it wasn't discounting it as much as like the Octopus Cozy tariff was. So I kind of discounted the EDF one. And the E.ON Next gave you a big tariff overnight. So it's 10 till 6 o'clock in the morning. Now, suppose if you've got an EV charger alongside a heat pump, that might be worth a look in. But the actual price, it was mainly the peak or standard day rate that was very expensive. In some regions, it's as much as 38 pence for your day rate electric. And that just seemed really expensive. And the off-peak was 17p. So I discounted Next Pumped and Heat Pump Tracker from EDF and E.ON Next. And the 2 that I really wanted to focus on for heat pump suppliers is Octopus Energy's Cozy Octopus and Scottish Power's Heat Pump Saver. And I think there are 2 scenarios I could find myself in here. So with the Scottish Power Heat Pump Saver, it gives you cheap electric from 11 till 4 during the day. I think if you're a retired couple, then this could potentially work out best, because most people actually want quite a lot of heat during the day. You're sat in the home quite a lot, so that could well work out as being a potential tariff for you. That was 14 pence. What I quite like about that one is as well, there's no peak rate. So sometimes what happens with these tariffs, like from 4 till 7, you'll spend quite a lot of money. So what Octopus do is, and I'll come on to Octopus in a sec, is they tick the energy price up between 4 and 7. So not only do they give you cheap windows and flat rate prices then between those windows, but between 4 and 7, when it's expensive for them, they jack the price up. So if you're not leveraging battery storage, that can be quite dangerous for you, in that you think you're saving money, but actually you end up buying a load of peak rate electric when you cook your tea, which is predominantly when people use quite a good chunk of electric. So if you've not got battery storage, I would give Scottish Power's Heat Pump Saver a good look in. But I think if you've got battery storage and we can avoid this peak rate, then I think the best one I've managed to find is Octopus Energy's Cozy Octopus. And on the note of this, I was talking about changes earlier. Tomato Energy used to be one of the ones that I would have rated, but they've since unfortunately gone out of business. That's why I say you've always got to check on this stuff. But Octopus Cozy essentially does 3 off-peak windows. So you get 3 hours at a time. So 4 till 7, 1 till 4 and 10 till midnight, which is your 2-hour rate. Something you've got to be aware of if you're thinking of picking battery storage, you've already picked it, obviously you're in the boat you're in, is your battery's ability to be able to buy energy fast enough. So this is where effectively, if you've only got a 3.6 kilowatt inverter, you can only buy energy in so fast, which means you can't fill your batteries quick enough. So the idea is you need a big inverter that's capable of buying it quite quickly down the supply cable that you've got. Another top tip for people that have heat pumps is to actually increase the temperature in the cheap windows, and then in the peak window, particularly 4 till 7, drop the temperature back down again. So you might go up to like 21, 22 degrees in your house, but dip it down to like 19, 20 during your peak window. And obviously it takes a while for your radiators or your underfloor heating to cool down during these periods, which often means drawing less actually into the heat pump. The heat pump doesn't have to work as hard, the coefficient of performance increases, and therefore you don't use as much energy. So for heat pumps only, I would be recommending Cozy. However, there's another scenario, because there always is. If you've got an EV in the mix, then you might also want to look at adding an EV tariff that I'm going to come into a little bit later, because that may well be preferential if you've got a heat pump. The next one I've got up here is for battery storage and solar users. And I've got a couple of things that you can do here to potentially leverage yourself if you're quite tech savvy. I'll come onto that right at the end, but I'll keep it simple to start off with. We have two main types. We have fixed. This is where the energy supplier will fix in your energy prices regardless of the time of year. And there are others which are dynamic. Now, the dynamic intelligent, like the EV chargers I was mentioning earlier, requires you to have an intelligent battery storage system. So if you're thinking of choosing a battery storage system, it's really important that you choose one, like a Powerwall 3, for example. They can actually make a connection to the energy suppliers to access these rates, if these are the ones you want to go and pick. So as I mentioned earlier, I kind of compared quite a few, and I discounted out of this British Gas and E.ON Next. And actually I quite liked EDF and Octopus in this equation. Those were the two that seemed to stand out the most for me in this scenario. However, there are layers of complexity with this, because different tariffs offered you different windows of charging. So I think I'm just going to try and keep it as simple as possible. Your Flux tariff only gives you, which is the Octopus tariff, 3 hours to charge your battery storage. If you've got quite high energy consumption and your inverter's quite small, for example, I've had a 3.6 kilowatt inverter, I could only fill about 10 kilowatt hours worth of battery storage up overnight. So you might be there going, well, I've got this big battery bank and actually it's not long enough to charge. Your inverter might not be big enough. So it's really important that you check that information out before making one of these selections. But the overnight rates with solar and battery storage in this scenario aren't all that great. Flux was about 17 pence, and actually it was in some areas it was actually slightly cheaper than that, but the weighted average was about 17p. On the EDF, that was the three-phase static, not three-phase, three-phase, and three-phase dynamic. So the three-phase static was one where it's fixed, like standard Octopus Flux. This is where they give you set time windows. They actually give you a lot longer time windows on that, 11 till 6 o'clock. And how they categorize it, they do a little bit different than Flux. They do green, amber and red effectively. So green areas is where it's super, super cheap. Amber's kind of like a flat rate. And then red is that kind of peak 4 till 7 window where you effectively get battered around the back of the head with a really expensive price. So you've got to have a battery to kind of leverage these. I wouldn't recommend this tariff unless you actually have a battery and solar. So your tariff on the intelligent Flux and on the three-phase dynamic is dynamic. So your battery storage connects with your energy supplier, works out the cheapest prices throughout the course of the day and charges during those prices. So there isn't actually a set price, but EDF do a really great graph actually on their website. On the EDF static, this is fixed rate for 12 months and was available as of the start of 2026. So this was green, which is their off-peak, was fixed at a rate of 17 pence from 11 till 6. It's quite a long time to fix a 17p, but it's not a very big discount. It's actually giving you longer to charge. Great for those households that have quite a high consumption, but actually that's not all that cheap. Standard day rate, so this is their yellow, was 22 pence. So actually quite a bit cheaper than your standard rate in a domestic household, but where you get clobbered round the back of the head was their peak rate time between 4 and 7 at 38p fixed. So you just got to make sure we're either charging our battery storage up before if you've not quite got enough. We always want to be avoiding those peak rate when we've got solar and battery storage rates, or if you've got an intelligent solar battery storage system, you can just make that connection directly with the supplier and let them do it all for you effectively. It's very hands off. You don't have to buy many kilowatt hours between 4 and 7 for it actually to quite heavily penalise you if you've not charged up enough. So this is also important when we make the selection of battery storage. So you turn around and say, I'm trying to cut costs a little bit here, so I'll only go for a 5 kilowatt hour battery. Now, if you use 10 kilowatt hours worth of power during the day and you don't have solar generation, your battery depletes through your house throughout the course of the day, runs out just before tea time, you could end up getting whacked around the back of the head in the winter with a really high energy price. So what I'm trying to summarise here is it's important that if you're going to choose this tariff, you also pick the size of battery storage that's most appropriate for your energy consumption. So start with the consumption you use, look at your system you've got, because just because it's cheap overnight doesn't necessarily mean that that will work out cheaper overall. We need to work out when your battery is actually going to run out, and that's going to be the biggest driver that chooses the tariff. So solar and battery storage tariffs, the upside to like an intelligent tariff is it's going to work all this out for you. It's going to make this connection for you, and it's going to essentially look at the grid and go, we want to avoid that window there. We don't want to buy it during then. Or in reverse, when we export, the export rates on Flux are much higher between that 4 and 7 p.m. window. So if you're with a big solar array that's got a lot of excess energy during the summer months, then you could be in a position whereby you could leverage your solar and battery storage, export between 4 and 7 and make the most of premium rate electric. So to summarise on solar and battery storage, I think you're a mix between the Octopus Flux tariffs and the free-phase tariffs, and either the dynamic or static, depending on whether your solar or battery storage is intelligent. I think I'm going to have a quick brew before I move on to the next one. So alongside all these import rates, Flux and Flux Intelligent have their own export rates that come with the tariff. They're not so great during the day, about 9 pence, but during the tea time rate, in some regions, they're like 30 pence for a unit. So you can effectively sell it for more than you were buying it for earlier on. That's because by nature, the national grid burns lots of gas, as I mentioned earlier, during those peak windows of time. So you're in a position whereby you can sell it to them instead of burning a load of dinosaurs, and you can coin in off the back of it. But where you've got one of these other tariffs, so we've got like Octopus Cozy or some of the EV tariffs I'm going to talk about just in a second, we can have fixed rate export or we can have dynamic export. So dynamic export can be set up alongside your battery storage if you're quite tech savvy to complement the prices on the grid. But most people like me, I just want a very simple answer actually when it comes to it. You can set up one fixed rate of energy. So like, for example, in my scenario, I've gone for Octopus outgoing that's 15 pence fixed. This is where I get paid 15 pence for every unit of energy that leaves my house. So as long as I'm generating, if I've got an excess and my house doesn't need it, I'm getting paid 15 pence for every unit. But those aren't the only units out there. The best one I managed to get alongside it was the Eon Next, and that was a 12 pence fix. Some of the other ones aren't so great, they're 7 pence. You've got to be quite careful actually with export rates. When you first register for export, so when you upload your MCS certificate and when you upload your G98, G99, you register for export, the energy suppliers, as standard, will just put you on one of their standard export rates. They're like 4p, they're rubbish, but they're not going to tell you any different. You have to actively move yourself to an alternative export rate. Certain buying in rates, off-peak rates, will only link with certain export rates, so make sure you check that out with your individual supplier. That moves me on to one of the last ones, which is EV rates. And what I want to cover is EV rates that work alongside battery storage, because I think that is the absolute holy grail of making the best possible savings. So when we look at electric vehicle rates, there are some electric vehicle rates that will also work alongside battery storage. And what this means is when we get the off-peak rate overnight, we can charge our battery storage up simultaneously whilst your EV's charging. In EV car charging territory, there are a lot of tariffs out there, and this definitely isn't an exhaustive list. I picked my top 10, I filtered a few out amongst the way as well, because otherwise I would have been sat here and this would now be a 3-hour video instead of what probably is a 40-minute video. Let's start with Octopus. We've mentioned them a few times in this video. We've got Intelligent Octopus Go that requires, as we mentioned earlier on, either an intelligent car or an intelligent charger. We've got Octopus Go, that's a non-intelligent car charging rate. And there is also another tariff that Octopus do as well, which is just a fixed price for charging your car. But because we're talking quite a lot about solar and battery storage, I've omitted that because that's only relevant for charging the actual car itself and doesn't give your house the benefit of cheap electric. It's always worth checking that one out. We've got British Gas's EV Power, we've got E.ON Next Smart Drive, Scottish Power EV Save, and we've got the EDF one. Let's have a bit of a look at the ones I didn't think were particularly brilliant. OVO Energy's Charge Anytime was 14 pence and it's anytime smart. So what you effectively do is plug your car in and anytime it charges, that charges you 14 pence per unit. The downside to that tariff is your battery cannot charge at the same time. Just pure in EV, the best tariff I could find out there was actually E.ON Next Smart Drive, and that was cheap for 6 hours. Now, this is another important equation. If you kind of think about it, 1 hour equates to 4% of your electricity bill. So having an extra hour can sometimes outpip the cheaper price that you've been offered. But the E.ON Next Drive Smart gives you not only the extra hour, so 6 hours of charging, but the unit price where we are was 6.5 pence per unit, which is really competitive. Now, there's always a downside to this stuff. There always has to be a downside to this stuff, which is their export rate isn't as good as Octopus. It's only 12p. So what you have to do is work out in your mind, do I drive more or do I export more? If you kind of don't know, the good thing about energy prices is a lot of these don't have penalties for moving. So you can move to them, gather 12-month worth of stats and then potentially look at moving again. But if I had lots and lots of solar to export, I've got an abundance of solar, then this might not work out well for you if you don't drive a great deal. Octopus Intelligent Go, I have an intelligent car and I have an intelligent charger. So I'm able to charge my car off peak, 11:30 till 5:30 in the morning. I link my battery storage up at the same time. Both go on charge. Now, as I mentioned earlier, my car's through the Octopus scheme, but even if it's not, you don't have to be. You can still access this tariff anyway. I just get it slightly cheaper by half a penny. And what you're able to do with that is get 15 pence for your export rate. What I do is charge my battery 100% full the whole year round. And the reason why I do this is, well, first of all, I've got an abundance of energy now at 6.5, 7 pence overnight. So first thing in the morning, the washing machine goes and it depletes down. Solar tops the battery up. Now, if I use all that energy and it tops it up, well, that's a normal system. But on those days where I spend quite a long period of time out of the house, well, automatically, because my battery's full, it misses the battery, exports to the grid, and I effectively get paid 15 pence for every single unit. So I play a big game of credits and debits. So I end up with bigger credits because I'm getting paid 15 pence for the unit and then buying it back overnight on the cheap rate. Now, there'll be some people in the comments that might turn around and say, well, actually, this can't possibly last forever. It will be the case that at some point the energy suppliers will drop the export rates. As it presently stands, export rates largely, other than your E.ON Next Drive Smart Saver, have largely remained quite stable at the 15 pence rate for a few years now. But let's say these drop to zero. Let's say I get no export at all. Well, my household, it probably wouldn't make much difference. I'd still charge my battery to 100% anyway. But let's say you're not running this system. Well, all you would do in that scenario is focus on buying and actually saving. What I think will happen is these fixed rates in the fullness of time will start dropping during the day, but I think we'll then get a premium rate export rate at tea time, which is, I think, will be the future of tariffs when we fast forward 5-10 years from now. I think for the next couple of years, I think we'll see these export rates probably stay largely where they are like the last couple of years. And if anything, as time goes on, energy prices are going up. So actually, the energy suppliers are further incentivized by buying it off you because they're buying it off you for 15p and your neighbour that's on a fixed price, they're selling it to them for 26, 27. They're skimming a profit off the top of it. Of course, there's always something in it for them. Something else to know about export payments and savings with solar is the fact that they are tax-free. So you don't pay any tax on any export rates. So you might be thinking, it's only 15p. But if you're an additional rate taxpayer, actually, you can add on your 40% tax and your 12% national insurance contributions on top. Because in order for you to earn an income, you have to pay tax, but not on this one. I actually also just wanted to note as well, if you do quite like a look of any of the Octopus tariffs, I know there's some other good tariffs out there as well, like that E.ON Next Drive Smart. But if you're kind of thinking, look, I've got solar battery storage, I want to be able to set this up, then we are an Octopus trusted partner. What that basically means is if Octopus can't do the installation, it's too complicated. Let's say it's a slate roof, flat roof, the battery storage system is too complicated, then often they'll recommend us as an alternative installer to give their customers some options. But as part of it, we actually have a referral code for the actual tariffs there, and you can get yourself 50 quid off if you want to. We're not paid by Octopus to say any of this. I just do that because simply, if you're in this process of changing tariffs, if you can get 50 quid, you may as well. And that hopefully wraps up everything I can possibly conceivably think of when it comes to tariffs, setting it up. I'll leave that link in the description below when it comes to getting that discount from an actual savings point of view. And whilst you're down there, don't forget to hit subscribe. Thank you.